Hope everyone can hear me clearly.
Yeah.
And yes, so good morning. Thanks for joining us today for Digital Transformation Forum. And I am Abi Wakama, publisher of IT News Africa. And this panel discussion is sponsored by Salesforce. Salesforce is a customer success platform offering enterprise industry applications, social and mobile cloud technologies, which help companies connect with customers, partners, and employees in entirely new ways, and delivering unprecedented growth and returns across industry. And I'd like to say a big thank you to Salesforce for partnering with us on this conference. So today's topic is digital enterprise technology leader transformation. And today we do have a number of technology leaders with us who will be sharing their insights on digital transformation. Most of them have gone through some sort of transformation within their organizations, or rather they have led digital transformation strategies within their organizations. So I believe we will derive a lot of benefits from this panel discussion. Today we have Logan Hill, VP of Strategic Industries Africa at Salesforce, Hendrik Malan, CEO of Frost & Sullivan, Michael Njenga, he's the GM Information Technology at CFAO Group in Kenya, Duke Matebula, Head of IT Business Applications at Saint Gobain Africa, and Moloti Nkune, the Chief Information Officer at MICT CETA. Thanks, guys. Welcome. Good morning. So,
thank you. Good
morning and thanks.
Thank you.
Afternoon.
Yes. Oh, it is afternoon actually. Yes. So let's get into it. Let's get into it. Digital transformation involves ongoing change for today's leaders. The panel discussion provides a platform for technology leaders to exchange best practices for digital transformation. Today, we will look at the top trends impacting digital enterprise today and how technology leaders can be at the forefront of enabling digital transformation. So first of all, let's go to you, Duke. Tell us, can you share some examples of what digital transformation means in practice? What are the opportunities presented by digital transformation?
Okay, thanks, Abe. Yes. I think for me, obviously, the word digital transformation is very broad, and you get, whoever you ask, you get different definitions of what it is. But according to me, digital transformation is about technology changes and the conditions under which is about how technology changes the conditions under which business is done. So in ways that it can change expectations for customers, partners, and employees. And essentially, how do you take all this exponential technological shift that is hitting us at a rapid pace, and within your organization, be able to convert it into innovation that can clearly differentiate you in terms of your business model? So I'll give you like two examples. At Saint Gobain, we've just printed our first 3D house this year in Q1. So what is that? What does that mean for us from a transformation perspective? We are looking at obviously leveraging that to look at a new model for us to derive revenue going forward and redefining how our business will look like in the future. Another example is Bridgestone Tires manufacturing that makes tires. They've partnered with Microsoft to create what we call a Microsoft connected vehicle platform. Now, Bridgestone finds itself in a situation where down the line, you're going to have more autonomous vehicles, more fleet, more ride sharing and such, which means there'll be less demand for vehicles, or there'll be less vehicles on the road. But you'll still have more demand in the fleet space, for example. So what it means is that they need to redefine themselves in terms of just being the traditional tire manufacturing company that just relies on volume, efficiencies, and economies of scale, into more of looking at other service revenue generating models around the telematics data that they are acquiring, all the sensory data about their tires. Now they can actually leverage that and create a platform where they can actually sell that as a service to fleet companies, for example.
Yes, yeah. And thank you for that. And then Hendrik, just tell me, what are some of the factors driving digital adoption or digital transformation right now? I know COVID is a major factor. Businesses have to transform at an accelerated rate. And apart from COVID, you can speak about COVID as well. But apart from that, what are the factors that are driving this adoption?
Yeah, I think we all, we've had a bit of COVID, I think, ad nausea, but unfortunately, I think it is one of the major driving factors of digital transformation at the moment. And it's doing it, I guess, at two levels. One is enabling the workforce. So, I mean, we obviously, in a response to the lockdowns and the various levels of restrained activity and travel, there was, we had to enable the workforce to work from home, data democratization. We had to use digital tools to create a workplace which was, physically and psychologically safe for our staff. We also had to engage with our customers digitally. So digitizing that whole customer journey was quite challenging, I think, for a lot of us. So, COVID obviously drove a lot of that directly, but I also think there was a very strong indirect drive, which was one of the indirect benefits, I think, associated with COVID, which was a strong innovation drive. So because of the risk associated with COVID, there were a lot of very innovative ideas pushed through the system that wouldn't necessarily normally be pushed through purely because of the fact, I think, on the one end, our risk barometers was slightly adjusted. And secondly, companies had the opportunity to look at the value proposition with a fresh pair of eyes. And a lot of the new way that companies are engaging with their customers, engaging with their employees, engaging with their partners, obviously involve digital platforms. It involves data, access to data, and more of it, and utilizing it in a more effective way. Yes, and I think a lot of that is obviously driving revised and revived digital transformation strategies, which is great to see. So COVID or not COVID, there's a very strong direct and indirect influence I think it had on the pace of digital transformation in Africa and beyond.
Thank you. And Maloti, when you look at the impact of COVID, you see that the process of transformation has been accelerated to a large extent. But then that also means that organizations and business leaders and management as a whole haven't had the time to actually think through their digital transformation strategy. Many companies have just had to go play it by ear and implement whatever their IT supplier said they had to implement. So how would you advise companies to transform within this environment and do it the right way, do it in a way that's thought through properly?
Yeah, I think just to reflect, I think last year there was a picture that was trending that was talking about who accelerated digital transformation in your organization, and the answers were mostly COVID-19. This is one thing that we've been not really picking up pace in terms of transforming our organizations. And COVID-19 came, and now it demands that we accelerate and fast-track implementation of digital transformation. We often even struggle to talk about future because we are having a demand to implement digital transformation now. We see the introduction of technologies like the Internet of Things, wherein you've got robots that are placed there to deal with the issues of frequently asked questions. We are also required to start developing 4IR skills, which this SETA is in the process of ensuring that the 4IR skills are actually being developed. That will then enable us to be able to train on the artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, 3D printing, big data, robotics, and all these things. So these skill sets are now required to be embedded in the traditional the modules of learning and development, which is required that we remain relevant in the 4IR space. In terms of digital transformation and for how organizations can actually start adopting or the strategies around this, you would have to start with the basics, really. For example, as much as this can sound a very basic thing, in government, you would hear that the document is with so and so. It cannot be signed, it cannot be dispatched because that person is actually not present. I have a colleague who said to me, Mulodi, my signature is messed up, man. Please assist me. And I had to assist him because we needed signatures and the colleague could not sign. So those are the basic things. Then you start now actually disrupting your repetitive processes in the organization that will actually require that you then relieve people to focus on issues that require a bit of intelligence, a bit of thinking, intuition, and so forth. Then following from that, you'll be required to start disrupting your market, the clientele that you are facing. Because when we talk digital transformation, it can't be a one-size-fits-all. It's actually relevant to the sector that you are servicing. Then you continue disrupting that. Let's not forget to now talk about cybersecurity, which we have seen an exponential rise given that we are now moving towards digital transformation.
Yes, thank you. Logan, would you like to say a few words on cybersecurity and how it impacts digital transformation?
Yeah, I think, cybersecurity is such a broad topic, right? And I come from that background originally, pre-Salesforce, etc. So for ourselves as an organization, as well as our customers, trust is at the heart of everything we do. And, when you're embarking on a technology strategy, whether it's transformational or you're building pockets of excellence to just change the way you go to market, new business models, new revenue models, security needs to be at the heart and embedded in everything you do, right? And it's not just about the technology, it's about to the pitfalls of people and process. If your people are flawed, your processes are flawed, your security model falls down. So for us, it's imperative that anything you do at a design level always has the human at the center, right? Whether it's your employees, your customers, your partners. So everything you're looking at as a technology organization needs to encompass all those facets and ensure that throughout that life cycle of that sort of experience or that journey, that as an organization, you have embedded security at multiple levels, right? I think a lot of organizations are doing it today. They're doing it sort of from the root, from the base of development upwards. The education that employees, even us as an organization, go through continuously in terms of being aware of what takes place out there it's iterative, right? It's never going to come to an end. There'll always be someone pushing the boundary to break something to gain access. So for me, we have it. We got to live with it. You just got to make sure that you sort of defend and you build appropriately based on where we're going in the future.
Okay, and now, Duke, I'd just like to like us to look at some of the technologies that will impact digital transformation going forward. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, look, if you look in that space, there's probably, IoT, artificial intelligence, machine learning, cloud adoption is going to continue. I mean, the IDC predicts that by 2023, more than 90% of applications used in organizations or everywhere will be cloud native. There'll still continue to be a push on automation for the laggards. Blockchain, digital currencies also will play quite a major role down the line. But I think for companies of all shapes and sizes, from startups to centuries-old brands, they need to understand how to use new technologies to effectively achieve meaningful digital transformation in the context of their businesses.
Okay. And
maybe I can also comment there.
Sure.
I can also maybe comment on the future technologies. So I think hindsight's a beautiful thing, right? And to Hendrik's point earlier, in terms of the pandemic, it's ad nauseum. But when that hit, it was, organizations who had already embraced the digital journey and were far along in that journey had the ability to pivot. And that was based on technology that they were sort of driving and deploying then, right? And organizations that have built platform-based organizations or driving a platform-based strategy were very agile in their ability to pivot and move to this remote world that we're all living today. And I think any organization who is sort of looking to what do I do next at a technology level, other than the softer things like people and process, needs to look at what are you doing around sort of my employees and my customers, right? And it's all around customer centricity. I think where technology is going at a transformational level is organizations like ourselves are saying, there's no more customer meeting first, it's Zoom first, right? So our entire strategy around how we engage with customers has changed. What does that mean for us as a technology adopter or driver or using technology is, the likes of the Zoom, etc., the holographic capabilities that organizations are bringing to bear, the VR type meetings, that's going to accelerate at a rate or not. And I think the way we engage in the future and the technology will come available will all have to be human-centric. So what are my employees doing wherever they are? How are they engaged? How are they interacting with the customers? The experience is better than it ever was. I think at a technology level, probably in the next 2 to 3 years, we will see growth in terms of capability in remote function and engagement that we haven't seen in the last 18 months. I think we're early in this journey.
I mean, just to contribute to that as well, I think, support everything that Logan said. And I think, so many industries are still dependent on face-to-face contact in order to enable their business. I mean, anything from a funding to a marketing perspective. I mean, the whole startup industry to a large degree is still dependent on conferences in order to receive funding. I mean, there's such a significant proportion of the technology industry that still require face-to-face contact in order to meet potential investors, in order to showcase their products, in order to be able to get the required level of seed funding in order to advance their products to the next stage of development. And it's difficult. I mean, a lot of these guys are struggling in order to work up to that level in order to get the next level of funding in place, purely because of the fact that these platforms just don't exist. So we're probably going to see quite innovative ways of engaging with various stakeholder groups, over the coming months. From a funding, from a marketing perspective, from a sales perspective, I mean, the banking industry has been talking about that single view of the customer for how many years. We still don't have that. How many other industries have been struggling to obtain that single view of the customer, with the intention of then eventually linking sort of front end with back end, with intelligent middleware. And speaking to the banking industry, for the last few months, they've moved their digital transformation timelines up by a good 75 to 50%. So it's a lot of that is going to accelerate the investments in digital transformation. But circling back to one of the other questions around how do you initiate it? It's the strategy, and the evaluation of the strategy is return on investment for all of these organizations. It's no different to any other parts of the strategy, really. It's ROI, and ROI has changed quite significantly, I think, over the past 18 months because of COVID-19, and whether we want to talk about COVID-19 or not, that's unfortunately what we've got to deal with at the moment.
Catalyst, propelled us all in a different direction.
Exactly, and it's changed the funding environment quite significantly for a lot of the digital transformation initiatives, some for good and some for bad. But I think for digital transformation in general, it's been a big shot in the arm, because I think boardrooms in general are listening for the first time. They're evaluating some of these technologies, and there's no reason why any board room at this, or board of directors at this particular point in time, should not be listening to how to digitize some of their sales journeys, etc.
Yeah, I think, Hendrik, sorry if I may add to that, you're right. At the heart of what's being discussed at board levels is CX is taking center stage when you're talking digital transformation, so that, you have to think about what does the customer really want and what value can you deliver for the customer.
Yes. And Duke, I was just going to ask you, as we digitally transform, how do we ensure that customer experience is not compromised? Can you say a few words about that and just give us some insight into that?
I think, so part of that, it speaks to sustainability, because when you digitally transforming, you've got to ensure digital technofluency in your organization to ensure that your employees also understand the journey that the organization is taking. And what it means is then they embracing the principles of how to sustain that desired customer experience that we are trying to drive for the customer. So you've got to have an outside-in perspective, not only just an inside-out perspective. So both those two have to work together in congruence.
Yeah, if I may also sponsor a few here. When we talk about digital transformation, there are two intertwined factors of customer experience management and disruption. We need to continually disrupt the norm, whereas we are also ensuring that we're managing customer experience. By managing customer experience means that we need to improve the manner in which we actually interact and render services from government. I render a service to the clientele, which is the general public. So the disruption that I provide into either my internal and external business should actually have a way in which they actually derive a benefit from whatever it is that I'm doing.
I think, Abby, I'd just like to add on something small there, especially in terms of customer experience. And this is mostly through experience. So what tends to happen a lot is that we digitize. So we move from a legacy system and we digitize, and it's a public-facing system and everything. But sometimes we often forget that that legacy system existed in the context of legacy processes. So it's important to remember, and I've had experiences sort of where that doesn't tie in very well, and I've seen quite a number. And sometimes we are even experiences you're getting, from say your bank or something. You can tell that yes, there is something nice and shiny that that they told you download this and it works, but then you realize at some point, whether you're trying to get customer support or something, that the processes, the old processes were retained. And so you've got this new high-flying system in place, but then being, sitting on legacy processes.
Yeah, that's a good point there, Michael, because any transformation journey, if you can't put a shiny badge on an old process, you think it's going to make it any better, right? So you got to rethink the entire journey about the process, the people that are using the technology, why they're going to use it, how they're communicating with the backend, what's going to look like at my customer. Yeah. If you haven't thought about that whole journey, doesn't matter what you put on top, it's going to look ugly.
Sure. I think one of the reasons why we have got challenges, especially this group here that is actually at the forefront of digital transformation, we are the most experiencers of user resistance when we are bringing changes, and as a result of digital transformation, is because as technocrats we then get engaged into these forums and they get to decide for the actual consumers of these solutions. Only when they are done, we then dump them to them, and we are then faced with the challenges because they come with a lot of institutional memories, a lot of processes that they've mastered over time. Then when we have actually ignored them, later on they then said, but this process is not actually catered for in the new system. Then we have to then relook back and start from scratch to embed all those processes. That is one of the challenges that is facing us as ICT leaders.
Yeah, there's an organizational mind shift and cultural change that's got to take place if you want to accelerate transformation. And if the entire organization isn't on board, isn't part of the journey, doesn't speak the same language, aren't all on the same rails, you're going to battle, right? Without a doubt.
We're definitely seeing a more open attitude, I think, from board members in general, because of what's been happening in the last 18 months. I mean, it is quite interesting engaging, I think, with corporate leadership at the moment. And it's not just for digital solutions. It's I mean, if you take a look at a global level, digital transformation, innovation, and environmental, the adoption of innovative solutions, environmentally friendly strategies, and digital transformation is definitely all three of them on the up, which is good, and it's directly because of the result of the fact that they are re-looking at their strategies, and they have an opportunity to do that because of COVID. Which is a positive thing, just overall. But it's been forced obviously onto some of the executive onto some of the executive boards. But we should capitalize on it because it's not going to last forever, I think.
Agreed.
Yes.
On that note, I think that we've come to the end of this session. Thank you, Michael, Duke, Hendrik, Maloti, Logan. Thank you for your time and your insights on this topic of digital transformation. And now I'm going to hand over to the moderator. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Great. Thanks, Abe.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Maloti.
Thank you so much to Abe and the rest of the panel. There's some really good discussions, really great points coming through. And I'm hoping now that that discussion triggered a whole host of questions that have come through on the Q&A platform. Remember to keep using it. And what I'm going to do is try and move those questions around and field them to as many, of the speakers as possible. One of the questions that are coming through, and I'm hoping our next set of speakers will be able to answer them, deals with the issue of digital transformation in the context of businesses understanding where to start. So hopefully we'll get an answer there. And then we'll also be looking at various other issues that do block digital transformation. We did get one response from our previous panel, so hopefully the answers will keep coming and you'll have a better perspective and a little more tools in your box in order for you to implement them. But we move on with the rest of the program, and we like to welcome our next speaker, that is Dr. Dieter Veldsman. He is the Group Exec for People Management at Momentum Metropolitan. Dr. Veldsman, welcome, and the platform is yours.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Natasha, and thank you very much to everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. I think what I would like to share just over the next 15 minutes or so is really just to talk through what are we currently seeing from a digital transformation point of view, from a people perspective, around some of the evolving workplace strategies. And I think what we've seen over the last 18 months is definitely a significant change in what we think about work and how we work and where we work. And what I would like to do is just share some of the insights from my own perspective, as well as some of the lessons that we've learned as an organization, Momentum Metropolitan, a multinational insurance provider in our workforce of about 17,000 people globally, and how we've tried to transition towards different ways of work and where we see that trend also going into the future. So I think for our conversation, just really 4 points that I would like to talk through. And the first one just being, let's have a look at the future. And I think we can all agree this morning that the future is already here. And there's already been a significant impact on what we think about work, and specifically how the workplace is changing. And I'd like to highlight a few of the trends that we are seeing there at the moment. Secondly, what does this mean for you as an employer and for employees, and I think for human beings? And what does it mean for us in terms of how we interact and how we work? In the third instance, I'd also like to focus a bit around what are some of the working strategies or workplace strategies that are coming to the fore, not just as a result of COVID-19, but also as a result of organizations trying to think differently about accessing scarce and critical talent pools, and also trying to reinvent themselves around the required skill sets that they need to have in place in order to embark on these digital transformation journeys. And then lastly, I think also just to add to one of the previous conversations this morning is, so what? Where do you start? How do you make this practical? And what are some of the key considerations for you when embarking on a new workplace strategy as well? So I think in terms of the workplace and how the workplace is changing, I think we need to agree firstly that throughout the course of the different industrial revolutions, the workplace has forever been evolving. It hasn't been something that has been static. And if we look across the first and the second industrial revolution, I think we can definitely agree a big shift, firstly, from factories at a workplace, then shifting towards more an assembly line, manufacturing type of view, then shifting into an office-based type of environment as we hit the third industrial revolution and the rise of knowledge work, and then a significant shift in the fourth industrial revolution to say hybrid workplaces, and I think a significant moment in the late 1990s, talking about the fact that I don't have to be present in one particular specific place to be able to contribute and to be able to work. Now, this has already been taking place over the past couple of years. And what we could see also is the fact that I think when COVID came about, we were forced overnight to fast track a lot of our workplace strategies due to safety concerns. And overnight, instead of us, slowly but surely moving and shifting towards hybrid workplace strategies, we were forced to move all employees, all roles at all levels to be able to work remotely and engage with the organization. And I think it has fast-tracked quite a bit the way that we think about work, and it's given rise to new conversations around what is the best workplace strategy for your organization going forward, and what are some of the things that you should be considering as well. Now, remote work is here to stay. It could double permanently, but I think there's different views that we are starting to see. On the one side, a lot of people saying, I enjoy the flexibility, my teams are more productive. But also on the other side, I think statistics like these, where people are saying from a boundaries perspective, from a mental well-being point of view, from an anxiety and a stress perspective, we are starting to see that be on the rise just in terms of employees' well-being. And we have to ask the question that if we do want to go into remote or hybrid working strategies, what are the things that we need to do from an organizational point of view in order to make it viable for our employees as well as us as employers to do this in a sustainable way? Now, I think we have to also ask the question to say, if we are going to go into this hybrid working world, what does it mean for employers and our interaction and what we think about work? And I think there's a few fundamental questions that we find changing. The first one, I think in the past, when we spoke about who will do the work, it was usually permanent employees. We had service providers from time to contribute. Mostly the job was done on site during significant specific work hours that were set, maybe here and there with a little bit of flexibility, predominantly delivered in a physical way, and work was positioned as something that I have to do to survive. I have to work to be able to contribute. And I think the main contribution there, largely to a large extent, was effort in hands from an employee point of view. Where we find ourselves today, I think, is we've already shifted towards hybrid workforces, so permanent workers, gig workers, contract workers, as well as then the augmentation with technology that we are starting to see take place over the past couple of years. And we are starting to see that people will work across multiple sites, predominantly leased or owned by the organization, but still to a large extent, most organizations these days still have some form or shape of physical presence. Work is shifting towards more flexible hours. And when we talk about how it will be delivered, we've started to see that people shift between physical and digital delivery of work. And I think it's quite an important and a significant shift because it's not just moving online, it's actually starting to deliver work in a different way. Work is positioned differently. It's positioned as a bit of a vocation to engage, so not just an activity to survive. And the individual contribution towards work has been around one of knowledge and experience. So I bring something else to the table besides just my effort and a contribution that I want to make. And I think as we start looking towards the future, these things will evolve again, where when we start looking at who will do the work, more crowdsourcing type of strategies, more collective community-based working taking place, augmented again, as I've mentioned before, by technology. But I think also asking the critical question around what work should be performed by human beings and where should that take place. In terms of where we'll work, definitely the rise of the third space, and we're starting to see that. From a third space point of view, what I refer to there is I'm not at the office, I'm not at home, but there's other additional places that we are creating for us to engage as the workforce of the organization. Definitely shifting towards anytime, anywhere type of approaches, and the delivery will shift towards digital, physical, and remote strategies. And I think it's quite important that it won't be one or the other, but a combination of those in terms of how we take work forward. I think from a positioning perspective, people will start looking at work and saying, but it is also around the pursuit of meaning and purpose. And there's a lot of good research there also from a generational point of view. And it is really around the contribution of expertise in a skills-based economy. I've got a particular skill. I want to enter the world of work and I want to deliver it in different ways as part of that. And this is the landscape that a lot of employers will have to deal with. And I think this is the landscape that a lot of employers will have to say, how do we attract the best talent and the best people? How do we keep them engaged? And how do we make sure that we can optimize and be productive in this new world of work and this new way of engaging? And I think the question then is to say, but what are these working strategies that organizations should be considering? And what we've seen over the past 18 months or so is really 5 predominant workplace strategies that's starting to come to the fore. Now, they're not better or worse than anyone else, but I think the consideration for organizations is to say, how do I choose a best fit for purpose strategy for my organization in my context that will actually take my organization forward and be beneficial to me in the future? Now, a key consideration for us here is really around this continuum of specific time, specific place on the left-hand side, right down to the other side of the continuum that talks about anywhere, anytime type of workplaces. And to start on the left, I think the traditional office environment, that won't disappear. We still see a lot of organizations saying, I want my people, depending on the nature and the type of the work, I still want them to come into an office environment. I still want them to work regular hours where I know I will find them in the traditional 8 to 5 type of mode. I think the hybrid remote working model or the flexible model, a lot of organizations were utilizing this even before COVID. And this really spoke to the fact that you had a desk at the office. You came into the office for most days of the week, but flexibility was seen as a perk. And flexibility was seen as something that we can actually build as part of our employee value proposition. But working remotely or working at different places was seen as a benefit, was not necessarily seen as the norm. The third one there in the middle, I think where a lot of organizations will end up post the pandemic, is really around flexible remote working offices. So what this means is I still have a physical presence, but I go to the office environment for a different reason. I don't go there to go and work. I go there to connect. I go there to collaborate, and I go there to engage. And I think it's quite an important shift to say that predominantly in that model, people will work virtually. And predominantly in that model, what we will find is things like hot desking in office environments. We will find a lot more flexibility in terms of space and how organizations utilize that going forward. And I think a really fundamental rethink about how we want to utilize our traditional real estate from an office point of view as well. The fourth one there, I think fully remote or working offices, this really starts getting into that virtual first type of mode. And you would have heard the language. A lot of organizations are coming out to say they want to be a virtual first workplace. And what this really means is there's no physical office environment. We've duplicated that in a virtual sense, and everybody will work virtually. Does not mean that there's zero human interaction that happens or occurs from face to face, but that really is the exception. And it's not a key requirement of the job. And we see from a talent perspective, this is really where it becomes very interesting around us trying to source talent from other countries, other time zones, other areas to contribute towards some of our scarce skill sets that we might not have readily available access to. And then lastly, I think a very interesting one on the right-hand side is then around asynchronous remote work, where we start saying, the human interaction in real time is not that important for us. And we actually say from an output and from a work perspective, we don't care where people sit, and people need to start utilizing asynchronous communication mechanisms. And that just means it's not real time. Best example I can use there is something like a WhatsApp voice note that somebody leaves until somebody else is ready to pick that up. And I think we're starting to see that happen and occur quite a bit in terms of how people are starting to think about what long-term work could look like as well. But this is also true. Even though we've got these workplace strategies emerging, I think we are still finding that managers and leaders find themselves unprepared to shift. And you can see there from the graph and the little cartoon there that I think there's this need that a lot of people still have to say, but I want to feel the pulse of the organization. And I can only feel that if I can see my people and I can, the traditional model of leading and managing by walking around. And I think in the long term, this is going to be detrimental to us from a talent attraction perspective, but also towards the type of virtual and remote workplaces that we think will become the norm later on in the future as well. But where do you start? And I think that's always the great question, to ask at the end of a conversation of this nature, is to say, how do I make this real and how do I make this practical? And what do I tell my organization about the way that we would like to view work and engage with work going forward? And I think there's 2 fundamental steps to think about. And the first one really is to say, determine what work needs to place where. And that has to be your overall first guiding consideration. What is the work? Step one, analyze the type of work that happens. So for example, in Momentum Metropolitan, the majority of our work is actually service interactions that happens in a traditional call center environment. And given that nature of the work, step two was then to develop potential workplace scenarios. One of those 5 that I've just mentioned, to say, what is our appetite with regards to that? And what we decided to say, we've got zero appetite to build the infrastructure for asynchronous work. So we would look at a combination of some of the other workplace strategies that will be best suited for our context and for our organization. Step 3 then is really to say, go and evaluate the viability of some of these roles against some of these scenarios. I know people is a key consideration, but I would like to challenge you to really go and think about, but what is the actual work that is taking place? And are we able to do that just in our office environment, in a combination? And how does that play out? And what would be those particular parameters as well? And then I think an important step then is to say, but what does hybrid work mean for your organization? I'm constantly in conversations with CEOs at the moment around the fact that they want to be flexible. They want to be hybrid because it's a very kind of, a buzzword at the moment to kind of put into your workplace strategy and your employee value proposition, but be crystal clear around what that means. Granting people flexibility, but asking them to come in for the Wednesday morning meeting is not full on flexible. It means something different for your talent, and you have to be aware of that as well. When looking at your people, there's also important to lead them along this journey of change and along this workforce transition. And I think the first step really there is to define what are your remote working principles as an organization. What are those non-negotiable rules of the game that we want to bring to the fore? Traditionally, we wanted to articulate those, and we didn't necessarily have to articulate them that clearly because people just understood them in our traditional work environments. But here we have to make sure that those principles are clearly defined. Second, convert that into practical work guidelines. How does this work for employees? What does that mean in terms of your rhythms, your routines, meetings that have to be in person, work that can happen off-site? What happens if I need to collaborate? What happens if I need to do deep work or creative work? And what are the options available that we can get ourselves there from a workforce perspective? Step 3 is technology. I'm not going to talk too much about that, but you have to enable the organization to work through the technology based upon the workplace strategy that you employ. I think what we found in a lot of organizations, our own as well, is the impact of things like, load shedding, not having power, and really how that is detrimental to the chosen workplace strategy. And make sure that you guys are able to utilize those tools as well. And then lastly, you have to take your leaders and your managers on a journey to equip them to lead from a place of trust, to lead from a place of empathy in this new world of work. And people will have to transition over time, and we definitely need to start looking at new competencies that will enable them in the future as well. So maybe just to summarize a few key points out of our conversation this morning, I think the first one, the realization that the future of work is already here. And you have to kind of jump on the bandwagon or you are going to be left behind and not necessarily be seen as an employer that is attractive to the new type of talent in the world and into the future. The second one, what has happened is that employees are starting to expect something different from employers. And hybrid workplaces is an important consideration for people that want to make certain lifestyle choices or want to have a holistic view around the choices that they make around how they set themselves up and where work fits into that. And I think to be able to access some of those scarce critical talent pools as an organization, you are going to have a response in terms of what flexibility, hybrid work and remote work is going to look like in the future. And then really to capitalize on this opportunity, be decisive about what you want and what you don't want. It's okay not to be the most flexible organization. It's okay not to want too many people working remotely at the same time, but be very clear around why that is the case and what this means, and help and enable and equip your leaders to be able to manage and lead and role model this new type of behavior aligned to that workplace strategy. And I want to leave you with a quote just from Dropbox and from Alistair Simpson, who looks after, their remote working function. And I think it's so valuable to say that we must unlearn the habits that no longer serve us. And I think be careful about just moving things digital or moving things online, because that's not true remote work. That's not true hybrid workplace strategies. It's actually just finding a different channel as opposed to really fundamentally thinking about what is the work, where should it take place, and how do we get the best of our people. From my side, I hope a few tidbits for you to think about and to consider as part of your own workplace strategies. And I look forward to see how this unfolds as we prepare for the future.
Thank you so much, Dr. Veldsman, for that discussion. Really, really key points coming through there, and also triggering some questions as well on the Q&A side. And I'm just going to throw a quick one at you just before I introduce the next speaker. The question says, what insights do you have to support the transition for leaders from, managing a collated team to leading a hybrid team?
Sure. So I think there's a few competencies that we definitely see changing. The first one, the leader or the manager's ability to articulate expectations much clearer. So what is it that I really want? We are no longer in that environment where, after the meeting, there's the small little meeting at your desk where you actually explain to me what is it that you want. So I think we're starting to see that from a competency point of view. Secondly, we are starting to see the importance of trust between a leader or a manager and their direct team. Trusting that you are doing and that you are contributing, even though I no longer see you. And the third thing I think from a practical point of view is leaders need to engage a lot more with their people from a check-in point of view and a progress perspective. And to avoid, and I think it's a tendency we all have, via Teams and Zoom calls, this activity-based management that we get into. I join the call, I ask you, how far are you with 1, 2, 3, 4? As opposed to saying, let me take a step back. We are still in relationship with each other. And let's first have that conversation, because I need to also engage with you from a human contact point of view. And it's not just about the work. And I think that builds relationship and that builds trust. So, Natasha, I think changing things on the one end, but I think on the other end, it's the stuff that we've always known about management. It just plays out a little bit differently as well.